All right, let me
Time to get into a review of Bad Religion's Age of Unreason. This is not a reasonable age, which is emphasized by the bad religion. There's no good religion. I want to hear the good religion. Please, Jonathan, direct me to the good religion.
Can I start now with the intro to the band?
Are you gonna give me the good religion?
No, but I'll explain the album name or the band name if you want me to.
No.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather just meme.
Okay.
Because I feel like my memes are more enjoyable than watered down Blink 182.
Okay, for starters, we're gonna get into that. All right, so this is the new album from melodic hardcore punk band Bad Religion, who formed in 1980. They're one of the longest lasting punk bands ever in terms of not only when they started and how long they've remained active making new albums, but also the fact that they never really broke up like a lot of them do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, all the other ones did cocaine and they're dead.
It was heroin. Come on, this is punk.
Okay.
Shit, that was bad. Anywho, because of how many died of heroin back in the day. Anywho, they only went on like hiatus a couple of times. They've always like been touring or like working on albums. This has been one of their larger like gaps from albums, because the one previous to this one was from 2013 when they released 2 albums. They released True North and they released a Christmas album, which on the one hand seems really fucking stupid.
Was it good? Was it like the Weezer?
Let me finish. On the one hand, this seems really fucking stupid. This is a melodic hardcore punk band releasing Christmas music. But on the other hand, I feel like this is also one of the greatest troll moves they've ever done. Because it is a band, a hardcore punk band named Bad Religion, making covers of Christian Christmas music. And all of the money they made from this album, they donated to like charities to help like the victims of like Catholic priest sexual assaults.
So maybe they are the good religion.
They are the good religion. Yeah.
But they also made this album. What am I talking about?
Oh my god, shut up. Anywho, so yeah, one of the longest lasting punk bands ever. Also one of the most influential punk bands ever. They were huge on the development of skate punk, which then kind of developed into ska punk and pop punk. And then they were also huge in the continued development of melodic hardcore punk. A lot of the like big names named them as like major influences, including Rise Against, including Anti-Flag, who I'm not a huge fan of, but I am a huge fan of Rise Against. They've always been notable for their very political leanings. They're notable for being, back in the day, one of the few hardcore punk bands who would openly admit to bands outside of the early days of punk being influences. They're the only ones who mentioned proto-punk bands. They're the only ones who ever mentioned the Beatles as being like a major influence on them. So they've always pushed this melodic nature of punk. They really like using vocal harmonies, which is something that's not common in punk, especially back in the day. As I said, hugely influential in skate punk and pop punk. You basically can thank them for your Tony Hawk soundtrack, because they were huge in the development of all the sounds that would become...
Again, maybe they are the good religion.
They are the good religion. I personally... never been huge on Bad Religion. This is their 17th album.
This is my first Bad Religion album.
Yeah, I've listened to pretty much all of their albums except for like all of the Christmas one, because I don't like Christmas music. Like even if it's punk Christmas music, I tune out eventually, so I never finished that one. They've been very hit or miss in their career. Their first few albums before they went on hiatus the first time for like a couple of years were really good. Their debut album, what's it called? I always blank on the name. How Could Hell Be Any Worse? That's what it is. It's amazing. One of the best hardcore punk albums ever. But as a whole, the band has never been one of my favorite hardcore punk bands. Not well, one of my favorite punk bands, period. I always liked the era right before them a little bit more, when they weren't focused on melodies as much as they were like being hardcore punk bands. But I have recognized their influence, and I appreciate them for what they created and how they changed punk and the influence that they've had and how long-lasting that influence has been. True North, their album that they did right before this one, was actually a fantastic album. I really liked that one. However, when they announced this album, I was very much worried. Not only because they have been so hit and miss, but because when they described it, they described it as an album of fuck Trump songs, which on the one hand, that seems fine. Fuck Trump.
But also, it just sounds like the description to like every dad rock band.
Yeah, like on the one hand, fuck Trump, but on the other hand, the other major punk band from that era who released an album of fuck Trump songs was MDC, a fantastic hardcore punk band. And they released the worst album they have ever made when they released Mein Trump, which is a stupid fucking title, an even worse song, and it was just a bad album. It was a terrible album. So I was really hesitant because I feel like a thing when it comes to like punk and punk politics, and especially with Trump, is that Trump makes us lazy when we talk about him, because it's very easy to just hate on Trump because there's a lot he's done that's easy to hate on. And
in a sense, you kind of have to become lazier.
Yeah, you become lazier.
No, I think you have to become like lazier than him. Example: YG's "Fuck Donald Trump."
Yeah,
and it's such like an easy song, but it's one of the best critiques we will ever hear of Donald Trump's legacy.
Yeah,
it's great, but it's so fucking simple.
Yeah, like you have to get a little lazier, which they have never been. They've always been like one of the more like heady, like thoughtful, like punk bands in terms of like their lyrics. So that was like, they're going to get lazier from this. Also, when you only focus on Trump, which when you label as a fuck Donald Trump album, you're forgetting the fact that Trump isn't the cause. Trump is a symptom of a greater underlying social issue. So I was worried they were going to like stop doing what they did best, which is like hitting underlying social issues, and instead just go fuck Trump. And when they released the song, their first single in years, called "The Kids Are Alt-Right," which was fucking garbage, it made me even more hesitant for this album. And I was pleasantly surprised, because throughout this album there are songs that aren't directly dealing with Trump so much as they're dealing with the things that he is a cause or like a symptom of. So much as they are just like fuck Trump, fuck this, fuck everything about Trump. You have things, it's basically a critique of the society that birthed him, not him.
Yeah, this is my problem. I didn't like this record. Not surprising.
No.
But this is just my knowledge. Not saying they stole from them, because I know they're inspired by them. I'm not surprised, but like they just sound like Blink-182. This just sounds like Blink-182 to me. I don't. Here's the thing. I know their influence fine, but what are they doing for me lately? This just sounds like watered down like dad rock. The lyricism sounds like watered down rock to me.
Yeah.
And it's super like just you skate rocky, beach rocky, or beach punk, skate punk, skate punk, but also like beach punk, like you're like Beach Boys but punk.
That's not a thing.
I know.
You're literally just describing skate punk again.
No, skate punk, but if they were at the Tony Hawk 2 Underground, Tony Hawk, not Pro Skater, Tony Hawk.
Tony Hawk Underground?
No, Thug. No, it's Thug. Tony Hawk Underground 2. Okay, I guess it's just called Tony Hawk Underground 2. That's a stupid title. That's also my favorite Tony Hawk game. I don't know why it has a dumb title. But just that soundtrack amalgamated into one song.
Yeah.
It's just too predictable across the entire thing, and like there wasn't any edges for me to grab onto. I don't have much to say, because for me this thing was just like one thing consistently throughout the entire thing, of just this one style. For like the first 4 songs, it sounds like the same riff is being used over and over and over again, and we're getting the same like tempo and same chords in these four tracks, and we're just progressing from one of the same songs to the next track that sounds like the previous.
So I understand where you're coming from, because it does come from like an area where like you're not as familiar with like the era they came out of as much as the era they inspired. It does sound like early Blink-182 albums. It does sound like early shitty skate punk and early shitty pop punk. Kind of. It is kind of like an understanding of like, this is the sound that, sure, it sounds like everything else, but it's the sound they created and then everybody else copied. So like it's kind of like both, yes, it sounds same, but like then you have to remember that they were the ones who created that same from the beginning. And yes, they have not evolved, they haven't changed, which, you can fault a band for, I guess, kind of. But it's kind of like when you're talking about like the Ramones, like the Ramones didn't evolve, and like you can fault them for that, but at the same time they were the Ramones, they didn't need to. You can fault AC/DC for never evolving, but again, they're AC/DC, they never needed to. In the same way, you can kind of say the same about like Bad Religion. Like they have never evolved, but in the world of punk, they are Bad Religion. They don't really need to. They just need to keep the status quo of what they've done, and they'll still sell records. They'll still be considered one of the most important punk bands like of all time. They'll still be one of the best selling punk bands of all time. And so you can take that. And yes, I'm not defending this album entirety. Like there are major like problems in this album. Literally right after Faces of Grief, or Old Regime, those next three songs, Big Black Dog, Downfall, and Since Now, are all trash. Like Big Black Dog, every time I listen to it, I want to gouge my like eardrums out of my skull and throw them against the wall because it just sounds so bad. Downfall is so watered down. And Since Now, I don't know what the fuck they're doing with their vocal harmonies and everything else, but it's terrible. And What Tomorrow Brings is like the only like saving grace for the last like end of the album because it's a good like outro song. Lose Your Head, like in the middle of like track 5, is a really weird song. End of History isn't much better right after that. But Lose Your Head is just like trying way too hard to be like a catchy like alt rock song. And so I think there's a good throwback album in this album if you just majorly like remove songs and restructure things. And I know because I did that on Spotify.
Okay. How long is it?
So
the original album's like 33 minutes, which is one thing I can give it. It's not the longest thing I had to listen to. They're not forcing me to like listen to a Migos or like a Drake here.
It's 21 minutes long. It's only, I think, hang on, let me pull up the thing so I can get the... It's 9 songs, and basically what I did is I removed Lose Your Head, I removed End of History, I removed Big Black Dog, Downfall, and Since Now. I kept the first like 4 songs the same, with Chaos From Within, My Sanity, Do the Paranoid Slow, and The Approach.
That's my problem with that is those first 4 songs sound like they have the same riffs.
It's what melodic hardcore punk always was. It used the same basic like chord structures. It always had.
It's not the same. Like it feels like the same track. Like they just feel like the 4 tracks flowing into each other. It just doesn't work for me.
Whatever. Anywho, then I moved Candidate up to that, right underneath that, because I actually really like that song. Then followed it up with Faces of Grief still. Then did Age of Unreason after that. Then Old Regime, and then ended it with What Tomorrow Brings, because What Tomorrow Brings is a really good closer. But like, no, this album as it is and as they release and as it's made is very flawed because it has a lot of bad tracks. It has a lot of them not trying to evolve that much or trying to do anything different, so much as they're just focused on like the lyrics, which I guess makes sense because they wanted that to be the focus. You can clearly tell when they described the album as an album of fuck Trump songs. It wasn't like this is going to be like a hard aggressive punk album. They're focused on what the lyrics are going to be more than anything else. And it's, if you are a fan of this like band, if you are a fan of this era and this genre of punk music, you'll find a lot to appreciate from this album. But it is have a lot of flaws to it, and yeah.
Keep in mind that all scores are meaningless and futile right now. I think this is a 3. This is what it is.
I give it as is a 5.5.
Okay.